Hugh Forrest, the co-president and chief programming officer of South by Southwest, has been at the helm of one of the world's most iconic festivals since its early days, helping shape Austin into the global innovation hub it is today. Hugh was influential in helping South by Southwest evolve from a small regional event to one of the largest and most influential gatherings in the world for tech, music, film, and education. In this episode, Hugh takes us behind the scenes, sharing insights into how South by Southwest became a cultural phenomenon. He tells us about the challenges and triumphs of scaling a global event and what it takes to build a lasting legacy in an ever-evolving digital world. Let's jump in to hear Hugh's thoughts on persistence, innovation, and the power of authentic connections.
Welcome to Uncharted, your sidekick for life.
Woo!
Yay!
Episode 11.
No, man, it flies.
Season 2. So many interesting conversations. And I'm going to stop saying special guests because every one of our
Super special
super
guest.
special
This
guests.
is a super
You can do like
special.
Dragon Ball Z. Like, it's like super.
This is a super special guest A.
super.
Supercalifragilistic.
But it's just been a wonderful journey getting to, and I use the word journey, I feel that word's also overused. Like all this social media is in my head, right? Because it's like all these words and stuff, but it's been a great ride. How about that? This last 2 seasons, as far as this first 2 seasons, as far as all the individuals that
inspiring.
Yeah.
Everybody has been so inspiring.
Yeah. And we just keep bringing on more and more. I mean, the world is just full of great
Interesting people.
Great people doing great things and different paths. And so I find that I'm getting a lot out of it. And I know that our audience is too. Let's get started. Let's get started with some introductions. If this is the first podcast you're listening to, this is...
Hi, I'm Natalie Payton. I'm an actor, comedian, podcast personality, and co-host of Uncharted.
Hello, everyone. I am Dr. Leon Vanstone, rocket scientist, storyteller, idiot, co-host, co-founder, and many other things.
I love that you put idiot in there, but this is the first time you've said that.
Yeah,
That's
well,
on your LinkedIn.
I know it is on my LinkedIn. Well, I don't know. There was some piece of me that I was like, I should be more serious or something. And then I was like, no, why am I doing this? It's not true to me. So,
Well, you know what I love it from I've never said this to you, but ever saw the very first.
like an idiot. Is that?
I mean, you fit the.
You know what I love about you is you lean into who you really are.
No. From the very first time I looked you up on LinkedIn, I'm like, rocket science is impressive, and storyteller, okay, great, awesome, because I do that too. And then idiot, I'm like, dude, this guy like just is authentic. He's humble. He's
What I like about that rocket scientist, storyteller, idiot, right, is it's a journey of itself. Right? Rocket scientist, storyteller, idiot. And now you're like, well, how is now? And then the first, like, well, what's the story? How are you?
Right.
And you're like, well, let me tell you.
Well, it makes sense because I
mean, the more you know, the less you know, right?
Exactly. Oh, thanks. I was trying to remember what that thing was. And like, yeah, that's exactly what it is.
The more you know, the less you know. So
yeah. And I'm Dan Dillard, co-founder of Founding Up, among other things, Founding Media, Founding Austin, Nest Financial, and co-host of Uncharted, your sidekick for life. And we're doing these great episodes that are all about mentorship for Gen Z. So today we have Hugh Forrest in the house.
Great to be here. It is an honor.
Thank you for being
extra
here.
super special guest.
Ha! Not really, but if you say so.
Well,
I think I fall squarely into the idiot bucket also.
You and me both, buddy.
Yeah.
Hugh's been in Austin.
I'm an Austin native. I grew up here.
Oh, wow.
Me too.
You guys are unicorns.
He's like, I'm not going to say my age. I'm just been in Austin all my life.
Before it was cool. And we'll leave it at that.
Austin's always been cool.
Austin's always been cool. There you go.
So that's how you know you're talking to Austinites, man. I've only been here 22 years, but that makes me, I think 20 plus gives me that.
That's before it was cool, yeah.
But yeah, let's jump in. I'm not even gonna tell people what you do now because it's just so interesting. But I'll let you start. Like what you do today, and then let's just start there, and then I want to go back to when you were 15 or something like that, and then what you wanted to do then. By the way, you're like the third or fourth super tall guest in our.
Yeah, no,
How
actually.
tall are you, Hugh?
There's a height requirement. I am 6'5" on a good day.
Nice.
Yeah,
having a
yeah.
Today's a good day.
Every day is a good day.
Yeah. So I am co-president and chief programming officer at South by Southwest here in Austin.
You may have heard of it, listeners. You may have heard of South by.
In my current role, I oversee most of the content for South by Southwest, whether that be in the conference, i.e. panels and presentations, or the South by Southwest Music Festival, the South by Southwest Film Festival, South by Southwest Comedy, and South by Southwest EDU. The operative word in that paragraph is oversee. Much more.
Make sure fires are put out.
At a high level, as opposed to intimately involved day to day, hour to hour in any of those activities. Over the last maybe year plus, I have assumed the role of co-president at South by Southwest. So a little more overall bureaucracy, overall management, overall leadership. Not a whole lot different than the things I was doing before, but a little more responsibility, and that's been fun. I have been at South by Southwest for
a number of years.
Nice. Similar to the age thing, a number of years.
Since inception.
Since day one, right?
Not quite since day one. I'll be a little more exact here. South by Southwest started, or the first year of South by Southwest was
5 years ago.
1987.
Wow.
Way back when Austin was certainly a much different city then, much more of a college town. I came on board in 1989. I was the first paid employee.
Wow.
So in the spirit of founding Austin, someone...
Are you in beer, or how did that work?
No, this was actually paid
real
in cash.
money? Okay.
We're saying paid in cash. There were other employees before that may not have been paid in cash, but I was or paid by check, or however you want to phrase it. Someone said I could call myself the founding employee. I don't know if that's a real thing, but it sounds kind of cool. And
is that what you were going to say when they said in the spirit of founding Austin?
Yeah, that's what's going on that one. And then,
by the way, real quick plug: if you want to learn more about South by Southwest, we did an interview. We did interviews with you before, but also Lewis Black, one of the founders.
Right.
There's a big story on he was on one of the covers of one of our magazines, and there's a really neat story.
Yeah.
Starting in inception. Incredible story.
And I got my entree into South by Southwest, which is a funny story. So that's why I often say it is I got hired because I had a computer and a printer, and they didn't. And so it was a hardware play that had a little bit of human.
I'm going to pull on the thread there, because today, let's just kind of compare to today. If you're a kid out there, AI, you might be hired because you know AI, right?
Sure, absolutely.
So if you're the only one that knows it, and that's
the thing with transformative technologies, man.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, and even a little bit higher level than that, any way you can get in is a good way to get in.
Right.
To get yourself into the door, through the door, and then try to make of it what you will once you're inside. But I certainly had no conception, or I don't think any of us had any conception in 1987 or 1989 that South by Southwest would be fortunate enough to grow as much as it has, as big as it has.
If I recall, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but if I recall that article, you expected at least from what I remember Lewis saying, you expected 300 people showing up at the first South by South, 300 people showing up at the first South by Southwest, and 600 showed up.
Yep. It was those are the correct figures. They, just their ballpark estimate.
Printer of yours was doing double time, man.
Well, the computer and printer, which is a Mac Plus, one of those giant laser writers from back in the day that was
Brothers or one of those.
while they were relatively state of the art, they were probably not to the level that what we even needed then. And I remember I had another job at that point. I think the first year that I was kind of part-time, and I remember coming over and checking on this stuff, and there was like smoke pouring out of the top of the Mac Plus. And I don't think that's supposed to happen.
That's normal.
Let's get a fan over you.
You were just overworking it.
Yeah. But anyway, it to your point, Dan, one, it was immediately focused on, it was entirely focused on music in those early years. But two, it almost immediately resonated with the music community, and again, evidenced by twice as many people showed up that first year as what was expected. Certainly, it was focused on music because there was such a strong music scene in Austin in the mid to late 80s. There's still a strong music scene here, but it maybe doesn't define us quite as much as it did 30 years ago. And I think that's always been a hallmark of South by Southwest, as much as it's changed and morphed. And because it's changed and morphed, is that the event has always been a strong reflection of what is hot and trending and intriguing and buzzing in Austin.
Mm-hmm.
It still is. I mean,
absolutely.
It's like if there's a symbol in the world about, and that's what I think is so wonderful is here was this idea 35 years ago that, let's do this thing. It sounds like fun. Let's get 300 people together and do some music thing. And now it's turned into this world known, like people fly from all over the world. And
world attended, yeah.
People fly from all over the world. And how it relates, and well, there's a lot of things that we'll talk about, but what makes me think the things that we're building at Founding Up, when it's all about mapping for life and trying to figure out, people want to know what to do next. They want to figure out what is that.
Well, and what other people are doing too,
Yeah.
Like, where are the traffic jams and where is everyone on the highway? Like, and how do I get on the highway?
Right.
Yeah.
Because it's funny too, right? And if anyone out there has never been to South by, it does bring an incredible number of international people in. It's incredible. From Japan, people coming in from China, from Europe,
Ukraine,
and all over.
Everywhere.
Like it really is insane. And every one of them, like delegates from countries are coming. From Germany's innovation office showed up, right? And if you've ever seen, which is hilarious, if you want an oxymoron, it's definitely German innovation. But, and I can say that because I'm European, but. Among other things,
the podcast is geofenced, right?
Yeah, right. I'm just joking, Germany, and but no, and they're all trying to replicate it, and like many of them are like, oh yeah, we heard about South by, we visited, we loved it, we tried to do it, and I'm like, oh cool, how did that go? And they're like, yeah, not very well, and it's some, I don't know what it is about South by's magic. Just people have tried to replicate it in other places. It just does not work.
Yeah, well, there's conferences all over the place, but it's just...
But they're not South by.
Exactly.
They're just not South by. That's not that, to your point, right? There's something, it's almost like a beacon of innovation. I don't know what it is. Like, it pulls all of the most innovative, current trending things into the moment. And it's a showcase for those items. And it's sort of self-reinforcing because the things that get showcased, I'm not there for the showcase, right? I mean, that's nice. It's nice to see cool, but they stand as physical testament to the ethos, the pathos, the philosophy of South by, which is innovation. And you can say you're about innovation. That's one thing, but to actually capture it is really hard. And South by does one of the best jobs of doing that, and it showcases testament, I think, to that. And I don't know. So I think that's what people struggle to reproduce.
Well, thank you for the nice words. I think that thank you for the nice words. It means a lot. I think that to the extent there is magic with South by Southwest, and if you think there's magic, great. From my perspective, not so much. But the part of that magic formula is just longevity, that we've been doing it for a long time and grown a little bit every year, grown organically, persistence. And I think when someone starts something, we're going to be the South by Southwest of blank country, they may not have that advantage of long-term 40-year runway. I think in terms of the mentorship concept of this podcast and the takeaway there is, patience, persistence is extremely valuable, is a huge advantage if you have that. And that's again one of the big secrets of South by Southwest is just that we were fortunate enough to launch before social media, before YouTube, and so a lot of our bigger mistakes we could do in somewhat relative science.
You weren't canceled right away.
Yeah, somewhat silence, and that is different from people starting events now. But anyway, I would also say that again, in the flavor of this podcast, we do so many different kinds of content at South by Southwest, whether it be panels, presentations, the music showcases, film screenings, comedy, and all those things are fantastic, and a lot of learning and discovery and innovation and inspiration that can come from that. But really the heart of South by Southwest or any other event, whether it be big, medium, small, is the personal connections you make there and the mentorship you can get from that. Yeah. And connecting with people you want to connect with, and even better, the serendipitous connections that happen where you
would have been impossible otherwise. I've had exactly that. Stood at a bar, getting a drink, someone next to you, strike up a conversation, and you're like, "Oh my god, you do that? I do this." I'm like, "Oh my god!" Right, and then you talk to them for the next 6 hours.
Pulling on the thread of that formula, just from, and in my opinion, my perspective, starting the magazine media and just kind of being seeing what the heartbeat of Austin is, right? And the heartbeat of Austin is community, right? Diversity, all of these things. And so and one of the things, I'm not sure of how true this is again, what's my opinion in having all of these interviews and trying to figure out what makes Austin so special. And when people ask me, what is one word to describe Austin? I say community. And I've kind of, through conversations, led that to the furthest point of where did this start, and it is music. Because back in those days, you were playing a set, you needed a drummer. Hey, and there was like one after another. It's like, come be on our, and this just kind of the music scene would kind of riff off of each other and kind of just be this nice tight group. And a lot of musicians were also engineers. And so, and so it went from this music community to software and having that same vibe. And I love to today, I can call anybody pretty much in Austin and say, let's go have a grab of coffee. I don't know them. And they're like, sure, let's do that. Because this is that, just, especially in old Austin, there's just that thing, right? And so when you bring that together as part of the formula, and comparing it to other conferences, a lot of conferences are focused on one thing, whether it's tech or whatever it is. And this community is like, let's do music, let's do entertainment, there's all kinds of tech, and so it's just this really nice formula that's about community and diversification. So I think it's like, well, a thread. Anyway, it's my opinion. If it's different, if that's not the case,
no, I think
you're
it's
canceled
great.
now. Get out.
I think it's so wild for me to zoom out and observe it, because I was born in 1990 and I was taken by my dad every single year, like as an infant growing up, and now I'm 34, and seeing it transform over the years from being, backstage because there's a gig playing and I'm just a tiny baby, and seeing it grow has been just wild to me.
Oh, that's cool.
It's really crazy.
Cool,
from like a baby's
everybody's
point
got
of view.
experiences the world so differently. Like,
Right.
I wouldn't have known that about you. It's like, I was at South by every single year with my dad.
Right, every year.
As a kid. All right. Jumping back, I want to kind of go into, because what you do now and what you've done the last few years and what you've done in your careers is obviously brought you a lot of opportunities and known a lot of individuals through all these years. But I want to know, and I want audience to know, is like, before you were that kid with the computer and all of that, what was your aspiration? What were you wanting to do?
You know, when I grew up, I think.
I mean, you're 6'5".
Well, there's that, but I can't jump too much, so it limited my basketball career.
But you didn't have that like a goal like that.
Yeah, I love playing basketball, and I played for a long time on that. And if I could have made more of that angle, I would have. I mean, two passions growing up were writing, thinking about writing. Can I be a writer when I grow up? But I also, loved the Austin music scene, and would in high school and college would go to shows at Liberty Lunch, venues like that every weekend, and just loved that. Wow, this is so cool. All the musicians, all the creativity here, and the writing thing. Hey, I do a lot of writing in my day-to-day stuff now. It's maybe not
not as creative as you want it to be.
Not a novelist, but it's writing is important. The other part of that passion that Austin is so neat. There's so much creativity here. There's certainly a straight line from that to what we do at South by Southwest, where we're again showcasing, putting a very bright spotlight on all this creativity in Austin and welcoming the world in to take part in this, to add their creativity, to add their innovation, to be part of this mix. And the fact that that South by Southwest happens in March, which is certainly one of the best times in Austin. It's spring here. It may not be spring at a lot of other places, particularly.
Most other places, by the way, would call that summer.
It's
Just
my
for reference.
birthday as well. South by
When's your
always falls
birthday?
on my birthday, March 19th.
Happy, way early birthday.
Thank
Or belated. There we go.
But it is a great time of year.
It is a fantastic time to be in Austin. There is that, you talk about innovation. I often phrase it as creativity, but there is that physical manifestation of innovation and creativity when
Spring.
Yes,
Exactly.
absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome.
So
The new birth.
I completely agree that. A nugget that I recall from one of the interviews is that music itself, like labels would release albums later in the year, and they've started adjusting their schedule South by Southwest.
Or to drop them on South by, so you can be the new
It's
buzz.
like it was before that. Yeah. So it was before then. They had a different schedule to release things, but then as this became more and more popular, they just started.
although I think that's true, but I also nothing
Right.
nothing stays static,
You're right.
and
Yeah.
where we see music now is
Is a very different world. Yeah.
with most music coming out on social media before there is any kind of formal album release,
Right.
or that's
Some people don't even do albums
Yes,
anymore. They
yes,
just drop like a series of
absolutely.
singles.
Mm-hmm.
So that change is created some challenges from where we sit from a music standpoint. But hey, the world is always changing and morphing and transitioning, and we're at South by Southwest try to mirror those changes and transitions and morph accordingly.
Yeah. I was going back to your loves, right? And music and whatnot. It morphed from what your thought was. I mean, we still stayed in the music business a different way, right? But I guess the point I was trying to make is, as with most of our guests, except for one, life changes. It's like, I wanted to do this, and then this happened, and then
yes. How is it you ended up with a printer and a questionable Mac computer? Like, what has it led you to that? From was it the writing?
Yeah, when I grew up in Austin, went away for 4 years to a small liberal arts college in the Midwest, came back to Austin, and I will date myself now. That was 1984. Very, very, very different world than where we live now. Similar to the gentleman at my left, I decided what Austin, Texas needs in 1984 is another newspaper, another publication. So started this thing that was called the Austin Challenger.
It's fun. Yeah, okay.
It was a alternative publication, less alternative because of its politics and more alternative because of its publishing schedule, because it was supposed to be monthly and it was about every 6 weeks. But certainly print was still a thing back then, right? And that was even the heyday of the Chronicle and even the Statesman. This thing was the very definition of bootstrapped, or relatively definition of bootstrapped. Half my advertisers were just on barter, so I would get my food from going to blank blank, and hey, I've got this little card that should get me 5 free meals here. But I was borrowing some money from my dad to pay the print bill and whatnot. And at one point my dad said, there's this new thing out there called desktop publishing. And one of your biggest bills is typesetting, because back in the day you would take your written manuscript to a service that would put it into galleys, and then you would, paste down the galleys. And my dad said, look, if you started going to desktop publishing, you would save a lot of money. And of course I was 20 years old and even more stubborn than I am now. And said, oh, no, we need to have that 500 DPI you get from galleys, and can't do that. Can't do that with
discerning readers.
Yeah. And then 3 months later, I went back to my dad and said, you're right. Let's buy this Mac Plus and a laser writer, and that enabled this publication to survive for basically another year. So that's why I had a Mac Plus and a printer. That's also how I knew the folks from the Austin Chronicle, Lewis Black and Nick Barbaro, who started South by Southwest. We were friendly competitors. I was no threat to them at all, because they were much bigger. They
had an 800 DPI print.
Exactly.
Just couldn't compete.
But again, that was my that was what the serendipitous connections that led me to South by Southwest.
See, that's really interesting too, right? There's two pieces I love about that. One is the sort of parental mentorship. No, seriously, right? Like if that your dad calls you up on some random reason to be like, hey, buy a printer, and you're like, this idiot.
Maybe I said it in 10 words, not 2, but
and now South By's a thing. But then secondly, also, right, like it's very easy sometimes in a sort of zero-sum mind game. You could have been like, that's my competition. I hate those guys. I'm not talking to them. I'm not working with them, right? And like in some, as opposed to being like, this is friendly competition. We're all in the same boat. We're all trying to help people. This is a rising tide. More can come of this. And look what happened, right? When you come at things with a constructive attitude, you can build something so much bigger than ever would have been there before, as opposed to being like, no, I need to destroy
in a spirit of learning, or being open to learn, being open-minded to the suggestions that our elders, so to speak, or people have come before us have to give us.
That's a great point. And it's important for any Gen Z listening to that, is that sometimes, you're taught a certain textbook thing that is competition and blah, 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 blah. And you come at this thinking a certain way, but you get in the real world. And the reason I call Austin community, the word community is because you can call people. Doesn't matter what they're doing, and they'll help. We had someone on the podcast.
Ned was telling us they opened Penthouse Pizza, Ned Lavelle, right? And their dough was terrible. So they called up Home Slice and they're like, hey, we need help with your dough recipes. Like, oh yeah, we'll send a guy over, and he just fixed everything. We'll send our dough guy, and they like, this is the recipe you want, and then that was their recipe. And he was saying with who was it got the queso recipe from?
I forget, but there's another
large Austin local thing. It was like, hey, can I have your queso? He was like, hey, I need help with
Taco Deli.
It's like, hey, I need help with queso. They're like, do you want my recipe? You're like,
nice.
But it is this building this community. So if you are listening and thinking about what the textbook says, just in reality, there's people just make the call and reach out, and that makes a
strongly echo what you're saying, or reinforce or agree with what you're saying there, Dan. Is that reach out, try to connect with as many people as possible. Try to enlist as many people to be mentors, whatever that means to you on your journey at that time. People like, particularly in this city, people like to help other people. And I do think that as much as the city has changed over the last 20, 30, 40 years, there is still that spirit of community, of cooperation, of rising tide lifts all boats, that we're all in this kind of together, and that's neat. And as long as we retain that spirit, I think there is something incredibly special about this place that we call Austin, Texas.
Yeah. And humanity. I mean, I love to spread what Austin is, this piece of humanity to the rest of the world, just because that is what we can offer to humanity. Just let's be human and just share. If I recall, that's how I met you, as I reached out to you and said, hey, let's go grab some coffee. So. And it might have been, I don't recall. I just know. Did you
give a reason? Or were you just what did you say?
I think it was shortly after you had launched Founding Austin. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure if you reached out to me first or if I'd seen the publication first and then serendipitously you reached out or something like that. But I mean,
let's go. And we've done this once a year we go have breakfast once a year at 24 Diner.
Yeah.
And just kind of get together and just kind of catch up. It's one of those things, and kind of see what's
from one struggling publisher to another.
Well, it's one Austinite to another at the end of the day. It's like, what's going on with our world. So, and it's just wonderful. It's just those kind of the connections that you just kind of continue, to your point, is just make these connections. But the fact that, I'm an unknown at this point, and he's like, yeah, let's go do that. And just kind of get to learn from each other. So just being that open is super important. I'm sure both of our networks now are like huge, but you've been doing it for a lot longer than I have. So you've got so many people that you've met across the time, I imagine.
I've been fortunate enough to meet a lot of wonderful people, and certainly one of my philosophies and what I've tried to instill in the people who work directly under me at South by Southwest is that, that spirit of community, that spirit of helping other people, that hopefully that we return communication quickly, whether it's email or whether it's phone or whatever, that shows respect to our community, and that will help us in the short term, medium term, long term. I mean, I certainly, never want to be that person who is too big time to meet with anybody out there. So all good.
You've heard similar things from me, right? It's from the team. It's like, let's make sure that we communicate.
Remember that, listeners. When Dan is big and famous, you can always email him for a coffee. And if he doesn't go,
if he doesn't respond in time,
the sound from this podcast.
There will be a response for sure.
Like, I could meet you in 3 years.
Yeah.
Mark the tape, right?
Yeah. Very cool. Throughout these years, I mean, I've just kind of wondered, is cool. I know they're all cool stories. I'm trying to phrase this question. anything stands out to you like, oh my God, that's like huge impact? You've seen so much, I would imagine. Does this like happen on a yearly basis? Do you look forward to South by Southwest to kind of like see the latest and greatest thing, or is there some stuff that's like, oh man, that was a really touched me and changed me?
Well, certainly, we've talked about this a lot before, and it's a story that maybe doesn't age as well as we'd like in 2023 or 2024, but Twitter essentially launching at South by Southwest in 2007. I say essentially because they didn't really launch at South by Southwest, but that was very much a game changer in terms of
having that impact.
More startups wanting to come to South by Southwest, a ton more startups, a ton more VCs wanting to come to South by Southwest. There were lots of astute people at South by Southwest in 2007 who saw Twitter and was like, yeah, this is a game changer. There are others who are like, well, that's interesting, but what will it be? But yeah, certainly that was has short form, personal conversation, social media in all its many forms has significantly changed everything in our lives, and we were fortunate enough to be right in the center of that. I say it hasn't aged so well because we all have different opinions of Twitter or X or whatever it is at this point. But I think the other story that is particularly relative to your audience is that we had, I think, 3 of the 4 Twitter founders there, being Jack Dorsey, Ev Williams, Biz Stone. There was another gentleman named Dan Goldman, who was like Twitter employee number 7, who was at the event. And met him, stayed in touch with him over the years as he morphed from one company, Twitter, to Google, to Meta, to the kind of Silicon Valley like and all the and somewhat similar to Dan, what you talked about with you and I, where we have coffee or have breakfast once a year. We check in every year and how you doing? How's West Coast? And then lo and behold, in roughly this time, early October 2015, he reached out to me. At that point, he was digital director of the White House.
Oh,
he said his boss wanted to speak at South by Southwest, and that was how we ended up getting Obama here. And my point of that story, the big takeaway from that story is whether it's a conference, whether it's a party, whether it's a dinner party, a happy hour, whatnot, meet everybody, try to follow up with everybody, stay in touch with everybody. You never know what that small connection that you make is going to lead to down the line. And that small connection for me, of this guy who was on the original Twitter team, again, turned into one of our most our best moments ever, which was Barack and Michelle speaking at South by Southwest in March 2016, and led to us doing this event at the White House in October 2016. So again, my point here, and I think in line with a lot of the other things we've said here as advice, is just be open, be receptive, follow up. Keep those connections alive. You never know how those connections will morph and change and impact your life down the line.
If I may add something to that, do it without expectation.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Because, you don't, it's not transaction. We've had this conversation. Nellie has asked me in the past, how do you keep so many relationships? I'm like, I don't expect anything. They're just, they're people. It's just, why not? And I think
it's not transactional.
It's not transactional. I'm not here to get anything out of anybody.
Right.
It's just kind of like, I'm
about
here to like
connection.
find out about what the passion of what someone else is doing, and then just kind of keep up and have that open relationship. And I think what I'm hearing you say is the same thing. It's like you didn't have any motivation. You just kind of, what's your lunch? Or breakfast or whatever it is, coffee.
Yeah.
And then those things just kind of turn into things at some point. Some of them do, and if they don't, that's okay too. So
Absolutely.
let's jump into the last part of this, which is some questions from we go out there and do, our correspondent goes out and asks some Gen Z some questions like what's keeping them up at night, and allows us that have been around the sun a few more times to kind of we won't say how many times, but we've been around the sun to see how we would answer this. So let's see what.
How do you produce ideas, right? That's pretty much the most important thing, considering all these factors, how do you make an idea that, is actually well thought from the people, they actually support it.
I think that it's interesting. I was lucky enough to do an event at UT a few weeks ago and had a similar question, and I didn't really like my answer. And then afterwards, of course, I thought, God,
I should have said that. Now you get to say it. Now you get to say it.
So yeah, I get my mulligan here. But I find that my best creative process, and I think everyone's different on their creative process, is just writing down ideas. I'm going to write down 15 ideas. That's my goal. And maybe 14 and a half of those are really bad, or maybe not really bad, just bad. But maybe there's one there that I can morph off of that. And just, again, it's the quantity of thinking of things, most of which will probably not come to fruition or be anything to work on, and not being too precious that if you bounce the idea off someone and they say, that's a really dumb idea. Well, okay, thanks for your input. Maybe it is a dumb idea. I'll move on to the next one. But again, just the trying to think in volume, and think that the more you do that, the more likely you might land on something that really resonates.
I like that answer. My process is, I hadn't really thought about a process, but one thing I identified with what you said is...
Ladies and gentlemen, I can attest that Dan does not have a process.
But I'm currently making some SOPs for us.
The key that I picked up on there is writing. The first thing, sometimes at 3:00 in the morning, I wake up and there's an idea, and I get to my phone and I'm like, I can't see what I'm doing, but I can type something that I'll remember in the morning, because it's like I just kind of recall that idea and then kind of explore that. But it's always like jotting it down, right? Yeah. It's something about that process where you can just like, let me just discover that idea. If I don't do that, if I'm in a car, I'll speak it into a recording. Absolutely. And then later come back and revisit it. But it's just, you gotta get it out, and then come back and like you said, whatever that process is, whether it's through friends or whether it's just kind of, I'm much more like I just kind of sit with things for a while before I present, and then kind of go there. The other thing is, I'm much more of a feeling kind of guy. So I expect, and I know this about me, is I've got some grand visions. And so if I tell a lot of people about my grand visions, they think I'm crazy. So I keep a lot of those inside until I let them just say a little bit further along the path. And then I'll find another crazy individual like this guy and say, hey, what do you think about this?
I was about to say, ladies and gentlemen, I can attest to the fact that Dan is crazy.
Nice.
What about you? What are you guys? What are your thoughts? Ideas?
Sure. I was going to say that believe in what your idea is, even if somebody does critique it or does challenge it. I have had success by staying consistent with my idea of the children's bedtime podcast that I have created and launched with my co-creator. It's Snorri's, and it started 4 years ago, and we stayed consistent and we continued at it, and we worked at it while having other jobs, and it just launched. And yesterday was the first time I sat in a Zoom room full of incredibly powerful individuals who all believed in it. And
I'm going to say, if you finished that sentence right there, I was like, there's incredibly powerful people here.
well, there are. I'm
just kidding.
Specifically that saw the value in what we created. And it not only was it validating, but it was like, oh, we really do have something here. Like these people with power and pull are willing to invest their time and resources into making this, making
Scalable.
a go-to-market strategy.
Right.
And that was really fascinating, and it felt so good because I had been consistent with my partner and we had just poured our heart and souls into this and done it the right way, done it authentically, and done it with the right goal in mind, and that is to help families and children learn to love sleep and understand the importance of a ritual and learn to love themselves through mindful affirmations, like all of which we should be doing for ourselves. Because can you imagine a little child waking up, I am peaceful, and then as an adult they have these tools to work with.
Yeah.
So
I can attest, as a father to a 2-year-old, my son does not wake up.
I am peaceful.
That is not.
He needs snories.
Sometimes he wakes up and he goes, Mama, poopy. But never peaceful, man.
Never peaceful.
Starts with a P, though.
Well, Natalie, morphing a little bit off of what you said, and I love telling this story, and probably some people in this room or in the audience have heard it before, but to the origin story of South by Southwest is that the folks from the Austin Chronicle, folks from the Austin Chronicle had this idea of doing this event. They, again, it was music only in 1987. The Chronicle had relationships with all the clubs because the clubs advertised in the Chronicle. And so if you're going to do a music festival, you need clubs. They went around to the clubs and, hey, we've got this great idea for this new thing. Can we use your club? No. Club owners turned out to be a much more conservative lot than you would have thought. They all said, that sounds really cool. No, but come back in 2 or 3 years when you have
when it's successful.
Yeah.
And
Right.
then I'll know.
Right.
Yeah. And then eventually they found roughly 20 clubs that all had the same message, which was, or all had the same response, you seem really persistent and dedicated. I've got 1 week out of the year, which is absolutely horrible for me. You can have my club that week because I can't do any worse than I'm doing right now. That week was spring break week when you had 40,000 students leaving Austin. So
Austin was a college town.
Yeah,
right.
yeah. The two things to take away from that story, particularly for your audience: power of persistence, keep knocking on doors, keep knocking on doors, keep knocking on doors. 2, into what you said, Natalie, is that many times, most times for entrepreneurs, what you're doing is taking something that everybody thinks is trash, that everyone thinks has no value at all, and putting some kind of value into it, which was, again, this spring break week that, this is a horrible week. I can't do any worse. Have my club then. Okay, well, I guess we're going to do a spring break because we can't get any clubs any other time. And within, 2-3 years, that became one of the most profitable weeks for these clubs. And then another 2 years later, they were doing as much business in 1 week of South by Southwest as they were doing for the rest of the year. So again, that story of sometimes you bounce your idea off a friend and they say it's horrible, and you think about it and say, well, it really is horrible. And other times they say it's horrible, and you think, I don't think they're right. I think there's really something here that I can, that if I'm persistent, I can make this work. And again, in most times, it's not obvious. It's obvious in retrospect, but not when you're pursuing this in the first place.
Right.
Listening to that intuition is what you've done, right? For 4 years, I've got this intuition. This is going to be, and that is part of the entrepreneurial journey. It's just like listening to that gut, because there's that voice of, I've got what's this purpose of whatnot. So that's what I'm pulling from this conversation. Thoughts or?
Yeah.
I don't mean to put you on the spot. If you
no, I suppose I'm going to go back to the original question because that's what I was thinking about. I think you have to make space for ideas, whatever that looks like for you personally. For me, it's in the sort of liminal spaces, the transitory spaces, right? The cycling to work was a big one where I would get a lot of ideas. It gave me space to think, dodge cars, think about problems, right? Like it's sort of almost meditative. Going to sleep is another one, right? It's another sort of transitory space, awake to asleep. There are those weird little moments, right? Where you're oddly conscious and
the
sometimes
dolly clock.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And
dripping off the table.
Things I would never have thought about fully awake come out of those spaces, sometimes, and you're right, trying to write them down or remember them the next day. And then I guess and you need to combine that, or at least from my experience, with the bravery to do them, right? Or whatever you want to call it, the persistence, when somebody else is like, that's dumb, or whatever it is, one day I was like, I'm going to build a drone. I just decided I was going to. So I went online, I found a design, I bought some pieces. It didn't work. It took me 3 months to figure that out, but I got it flying and that was fun, One day I was like, I'm going to start a company. Like, it's when you look at someone, especially if I think back to like being 18 or at university, when you're very early in this journey about agency in life, and you look at sort of people such as yourself, right, who inexorably built South by Southwest, like as if this guy's like, how do you have an idea that worked? As if when you were getting involved, you're like, okay, we're going to do this, then we're going to have Barack Obama, and he's going to present in 40 years.
And it's going to be great.
The 30-year plan.
It's going to be great. Right? Let's go, right? And so it was like, no, you had the persistence to keep adapting the idea. You had the tenacity to believe in the end it would be big, from you and all of those things. The tenacity is the word I think perhaps I want, and you gave yourself those spaces to think or to dream, and you kept doing it. And I'm sure there are some horror stories, but you kept going. You didn't just give up. You didn't just cancel it because of one mistake, and that gave you time to ideate and adapt and grow with the market too, because the idea you had, I'm sure, was great for the time and, whatever. But
horror stories. I'm like, COVID.
That model would never work today, as you said, right, about the grammar. So it's like even the idea y'all had, even if you is for then, and you've got I'm going to do a music festival that lasts the next 40 years. And I'm like, well, you better be able to tell the future then, because like even small changes, like people don't drop albums anymore. They've gone back to dropping singles, right? Like, oh, that's challenging for us in our model. So it never once was it static. You're always changing and adjusting and everything else. So I don't know. That's kind of like my thought on the question that Edwin asked. Edwin.
Edwin's got another question or another thought.
Oh, he's got the shotgun question.
Yeah, let's see what
Double Edwin.
How to control your body, how to control your energy, really, because especially being in these rooms of so much, energy going around, I remember testifying at the Texas subcommittee for higher education. And I was surrounded by professors, by presidents of different organizations, and by the senators and by chancellors of different schools. And, I remember feeling the energy in these, in that place, just all the importance, all the decisions that are made by all these people. But even, that was for me good energy. And it, but also how do you handle bad energy, right? Whenever you're in a room of people that, absolutely probably don't want to handle you, or they don't like your ideas, or they just want to not even work with you, but completely erase what you want to do and do something else. How do you control your energy? Because those people can always be convinced, but it's not always the ideas. It's also how you present yourself.
Yeah.
Wow.
I love that question.
I think Edwin is someone that we interviewed at ACC, and this is the follow-up.
Must have. Yeah. Can I see? Yes, we spoke.
I think he was one of the in the political.
Yeah, he was in student government.
Yes,
that's right.
Yeah.
Well, I'll go to the second part of his question first. You try not to place yourself in a room with people who don't who are hostile to you. And
I think he was thinking government, political, that kind of stuff.
Right.
So, but yeah, I get what you're saying.
Definitely choose your battles. Certainly, for me, I have become or had periods where I'm better and worse at this, but learning to meditate, trying to find some kind of quiet time daily to just focus on breathing, focus on a mantra for the day, be peaceful, something like this. That has helped a lot. Ironically or not ironically, it's often the first thing I cut out of my day when things get really busy, and it should be the thing that I do more when things get really busy because it helps with stress. I have also found, this is again, I hope a lesson to some of the younger listeners out there that when the first 15 years that I was involved with South by Southwest, I was deathly scared of public speaking. I mean, would rather go get 5 root canals than public speaking.
Wow.
Be shaking, barely able to talk. And at some point that just went away, and I still get nervous, a little bit nervous, but certainly not like it was before. And I think the lesson there is somewhat similar to some of the other stuff we talked about, just repetition. It's the more you do it, the more comfortable you become. The more your body doesn't have a physical reaction to being on stage, of tensing up and whatnot. And that has been a total gift to me of not, having to dread, oh my God, South by Southwest is coming in. I'm going to have to intro these people and in front of an audience of 500 people or whatever, and I'm going to be so scared, and that doesn't quite happen anymore, and that's been great. But again, the bigger lesson of just there may be things you don't do well. If you want to do better at them, keep doing it, keep practicing, and you'll eventually get better. Now, I will also say that there are still times where I'll speak in public or whatnot, and I'm like, God, that just was, I really flubbed that up, and I'll go back and like do a forensic on it. What didn't I do right in preparation? What did I? What was my energy wrong on? How should I have answered that question better? So I think it's it's that idea of the plane flying across country. It's not a straight line. You're always making adjustments and to get to the place you want to get to.
Yeah. Okay, I have a secret. Sometimes when I feel insecure about speaking with powerful people or people that I don't feel up to snuff for, or that I belong, in order to remind myself that I am worthy to be in the room, I literally will do the superhero pose in front of the mirror, and I'll smile. And to remind myself, like physically get it in my body that like I can do this. And even if I don't believe it, the more I do it, it does sink in and fall in. And then I remind myself, well, I am on that Google Meets link. I was invited to be here. You know what I mean? They do want me there. So I have to remind myself when I get nervous about public speaking or presenting to those that I have never met before, or I think are more powerful than I, that I belong and I'm enough.
Yeah, the posture thing is real, and we've had many speakers at South by Southwest over the years talk about that,
it brings the energy.
Yeah, exactly.
And so one of the things that Tony Robbins does backstage, he'll get this like jump. He'll start just gets this energy going in his body before he hits stage. And so everybody's got different things. I've done that. I've prayed, I've meditated, I think things through in the morning. But I mean, there's so many tips. One is just being aware that no matter who's in the room, what you've got to say, just be the best at like your material. And this goes back to my financial planning career. When I started, I was like, well, who am I? I'm 20 something years old, advising millionaires have done so much more than I, and I'm, they talk about imposter syndrome. Like I'm supposed to be advising them.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to remember that I have all this material in my head because of all the stuff that I actually spent time studying. And so I am the expert in the room when it comes to how this works. And these individuals are experts in other areas, and it's just different. And so by being able to separate that expertise was one way that I was able to overcome that fear. And we all have this fear of how do you relax that fear? And that was one, is just knowing your content really well. And it doesn't matter if you're in politics or you're dealing with VCs or whatever it is, you just got to know your stuff really, really well. Repeat, meditate, talk to yourself, exercise, or do the physical energy thing. We'll leave the last comment to you if you want it.
Sure. Maybe I'm just a bit too socially awkward. I just kind of show up as I am. I will say,
like,
well, but okay. Here's so when I failed out of like big London banking and took this PhD in a dead end science field, basically at the time. One of the first things I did, I was like, man, what I disliked about the job was I really felt like I was just taking from people and I wanted to give back. So I started volunteering in a science club. And if that was pretty thankless. You'd show up to some club. The teacher was clearly more interested in grading than really running the club. And I don't blame them because it's not like they're underworked and overpaid. You know what I mean? And so I was a welcome distraction so that they could do this. And man, if you've ever wanted an honest audience, in most audiences, unless you say something incredibly controversial, will smile and clap at the end no matter what happens, right? But you definitely, they're like, okay, I get it. He's nervous, right? Whatever. Woo, yeah. Man, a class full of 15-year-olds will not. Sir, that's right. Sir, why are you sir? And it turns out I was quite good at it. So the next thing I know, someone's like, oh, yeah, that was quite good. Can you come do this to like a room of 200? Now you're in a room full of 200 to 13-year-olds. So this is boring. It's boring. It's like, oh, God, you're killing me.
Just the audacity.
Yeah, like just the sheer audacity. And so I don't know if it was just that trial by fire of just at any moment anyone being like, you're dumb and this is rubbish.
Hecklers.
Right? They're just like, all right, okay. Like, that's the angle we're taking today. Great to see you too. Just by the time I was on stage, I was like, man, this is actually a lot nicer. This is like more comfortable than being in an auditorium with 200 kids trying to run a science experiment.
So go do the hard thing.
Yeah, right. Well, and what's nice about it though is like 13-year-olds have no opportunity to ruin your life. You know what I mean? There's no, they're not going to get me fired.
Until they get their phone out and record it.
Well, yeah, this was before that, right? Like, in fairness, true. But like, they can't get you fired. They can't influence your world, right? They're not. So maybe that's like the optimal one. They're the most brutal audience. And so after that, yeah, I mean, like, there's always a nervousness, a sort of like, what is it I'm trying to say? And am I going to get this across, and trying to keep that in your head? But somebody once said to me, I was doing this like national science communication competition in England, and someone said to me, it was actually one of the biggest compliments I've ever got. She said, the best thing about you communicating science, Leon, is you're the same guy as if you're talking to me now. You're just on stage. I was like, hey, everyone, cool, nice to see you. I'm Leon. Yeah.
I was going to say, being authentic is one of the fears I had years and years ago was vocabulary. Like I wasn't as articulate as others in the room, and I was like, oh, how am I going to be able? But then I just storytelling, just get into storytelling, get into yourself, be authentic, and not. As soon as I got over that mental, and it's all mental. These are stories we're telling ourselves.
Totally.
As soon as you get over that, and you realize that you're just having a conversation and relax, then it just doesn't really matter if you're not. There's some of the greatest speakers don't have the highest vocabulary. It's just you just have to get in there and show your heart and your passion and where it's at, and people will identify.
Yeah, that authenticity idea is incredibly important.
Well, that's it for today. Thank you so much for being with us. This was a great episode.
Thank you for having me. This was
Yeah,
Thank
a
you.
lot of fun.
I think that our audience is going to really appreciate learning a lot of nuggets from South by what you've shared.
I hope so.
Hugh Forrest is a true pioneer in the world of creative and tech innovation. It was so interesting to have an insider's view into the story of South by Southwest and hear the lessons Hugh has learned along the way. If you're inspired to shake things up and make your own mark, remember that every groundbreaking event and idea starts with a spark, a community, and a vision, just like South by Southwest. Thanks for tuning in to Uncharted, your sidekick for life. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave us a review if you enjoyed this episode. If you're Gen Z and would like to be featured on the podcast, visit us at foundingup.com or check out the show notes. We'll catch you next time as we continue to explore the uncharted paths of the world's boldest creators and thinkers.